Hello everyone. This is Dr. Kim. Uh, as I mentioned, today I would like to bring some of a online course regarding our subject. As you know, now this day, because of a corona outbreak, we cannot offer any courses in the MPI. So I kind of have decided to learning the YouTube stream to give you the some of the lectures as much as I can. So today I like to do the topics and architecture design, which is chapter 6. And then you already have a document regarding this matter, and then I like to briefly go on through the presentation. As you may know, that presentation already posting last week, second half of last week, and then this week's presentation. I kind of merged together, and then you can see that that our lectures. But you need to understand that it's not like a regular lecture, so it will be not like 1.5 hours or 3 hours to cover. I just gonna do the maybe half hours or the less than half hours. I quickly get through it. Okay. So for the session, we're gonna discuss about the architecture design decision, architectural review, and then architectural patterns, and application of architecture. So this will be our course for the chapter 6, and then each of them I will cover briefly cover. One thing you need to understand is that it's not like regular lectures. So I'm strongly recommend, even though I skip it, most of a slide, I just gonna pick the important part. So I'm strongly recommend you need to get through all of the presentation files and then your textbook, which I already aligned with the chapters I already mentioned as a chapter 6. So this one is just you consider as a guideline, and then I like to you need to take a look at for the presentation files and the textbook, which I already share you during the classroom. So architectural design is basically the concern to understand how the software should be organized and then design. So it is basically the overall structure of the system. And then it's critical link between the design and requirement engineering. So it's, they have So and then the output architecture design process in the architecture models, which shows the how system is organized, and then also how the communication between the components. So they have that generally accept that Azure of process, and then the reinforcing the systems architecture. Refactoring the system architecture is quite expensive. So before you do that, you kind of drawing the pictures before you actually do the refactoring the system. So this one is a typical diagram of architecture. So you can see the sum of blocks and then the arrows. So it's like a process flow, or it's like, in other words, it's called the system diagram. Then you can use the architecture design only for the you may consider as a software, but it doesn't have to. So architectural design abstraction, so all this level you concern the way of individual program as decomposed into the component. Okay, so instead of saying all of a word, we will take a look at in the pictures that we'll show you later. So Dave, what would be the advantages for the split or design of architecture? Because it's easy to communicate with your stakeholders, and then the system analysis, and then you can take a look at which part you can reuse it, and then sometimes you consider as a product line architecture is mainly part of operation research or operations management. As I said before, software engineering is quite have a good connection between the managerial perspective and then the particularly operations management. It's quite a huge connection between them. And then they have architectural representation. You can take a look at the text. Okay. So yeah, I'll get through. And then basically the architecture design using your box and the line diagrams. So it's very abstract, but it's very useful to communication with the stakeholders. Stakeholders, in other words, you may need to discuss your application or your software with your managers. So it's not only for the stakeholders. More likely when you communicate, when you as an engineer or as a developer, if you need to communicate with the non-engineers or the non-developers which have less knowledge regarding the software or the engineering. The block diagrams or process diagram or the architecture design practically is the same thing, so you can easily make them easy to understand what you want to develop. Okay, so how we're gonna use that? You can take a look at the way of facilitating the discussion about the system design, and then the way of documenting has been designed. So that is how we're gonna use your architecture models. And then architecture design is creative process. So processes differ depending on the type of system being developed. Again, only matter will be that how you're gonna define your system. Right now it's kind of a system which running under the software, but it's not only for that. You can see a lot of examples regarding the block diagrams or the process diagram in the managerial field. So there are several parameters when you do the architecture design or design of architecture. So you can see some of the questions, critical questions. You may take a look at it, and then all of these questions, like this one, and this one, and this one, and this one. So you can you can see that how it works. And you need to think about architectural reuse. So if you have a system or software in the same domain, and then the architecture is reflects of the domain concept, and then the application product line are built of the core architecture. So yeah, you can see that the sum of idea about what is architecturally. And then they have architecture and system characteristics, or think about when you develop the system, what kind of things or what kind of a KPI you need to consider. So it's not only for the architecture design, but also when you develop the system, you may consider this kind of things. Okay, so you need to consider the performance, security, safety, availability, maintainability. So architectural view is that is useful when you design design and documenting systems architectures and what notation you're gonna use it. So yeah, they have several way to develop architecture design or process design. But simple way, one of the bottom line is that simple is good. So you don't need to. Rather not to use complex or the many icons or the shapes and so forth. Diagram, simple rectangular diagram and arrow sometimes enough. Even that is enough to drawing your architecture or your software. Okay. So what is architecture view? Once you design the system architecture, you need to take a look at the logical view, development view, physical view, and the process view. Okay, so this kind of things. It's not like a single task of the architecture design. You need to take a look at the various view before you start to develop architecture design. So each of them, they have a certain comments regarding this. And then the last one, they have either use case or scenario. That will be the think about how your system is actually working. So yeah, if you have a chance to take a look at the additional document or the on your computer, you may googling the so-called use case design or the use cases analysis. So that kind of you see in here use case here, right? Use case. So you can see that um, the business point of view of the use case analysis, and then that is quite useful when you developed not only for the system architecture design but also requirement engineering. That kind of concept is quite useful. And then the yeah, how are you gonna representing to the architecture view? One of a famous one, conventional one is gonna be you use the UML, Unified Modeling Languages. Okay, but as I said, if your counterpart or your people to communicate is only computer science or engineering, I mean more specifically the computer science people who knows about the UML, then you can develop the architecture design by using the ULM. Even you can just show them the code how it works. But if it's not, and then particularly if you need to, I mean, practically speaking, you most likely not only talk with your software, your co-workers who develop the software or system by themselves. More likely you need to talk with the other range of people. Okay, so even though that it should say that UML is quite useful tool, but personally I rather recommend to do it when you develop the system architecture. Okay, they have and then when you developed developed or when you design the architecture system architect, you're gonna see the sum of patterns. So patterns are representing and sharing the using the knowledge, and then the architecture pattern is that the description of a good design practice. And then the pattern should be include information when they are not or when they are and when they are not useful. So that kind of things you need to contain as a patterns. It's, even though they called it pattern, more likely the information. So when you take a look at so basically once you have architecture, particular system architecture, then you need to take a look at what its pattern will be. So you can see that this one is one of example for the MWC pattern. And then you're gonna have these items. So basically the patterns need to include description of a system and an example of a system, and then when to use, advantages, disadvantages, and so forth. Okay, so yeah, and then this one is organization of MVC. Okay, so they have a controller and the models and view, and then they have interconnection between them, and then it's more likely to using the UML like diagram. Right, and then web application using the MVC pattern. So you have again the controllers, models, and view, and then you have a browsers on the top, and then you can see what kind of thing is needed for the controller view and the model. And then the other way to do it is going to be the layered architecture. So when you develop the system architecture, so you may need to dealing with several layers. It's like ISO layers or network layer. On the communication system. Similarly, see that layered system patterns. You can see the descriptions and an example when to use the advantages and disadvantages. So you can take a look at each of them are descriptions between them. And then the generic layered architectures, you're gonna have these types, but they are it's not. This is one of the recommendation of the research paper, but it's not the only way. Okay, so they have a similar architecture in the computer networks. Like I believe you may familiar with the network layers, TCP/IP layers, presentation layers, and so forth. So and then the many researchers who involved in the software, they developing their own layered architecture is quite useful to describe the system, particularly for the non-developers perspective. Okay. So this one is, one of a case you need to, if you are not familiar with the island, is this one of an example, one of a case in the textbook. So it's not included in the presentation, but I strongly recommend you to read the textbook. Take a look at what is the case is about. So in this case, you can see that they have certain types or certain things based on the layered architecture. And then when you design the system, you need to consider the repository architecture or storage architecture, which means that how you're gonna data will be the exchange or the store. Okay, so you can take a look at what is definition is, and then again you describe the repository patterns based on this criteria. So what is the description of the repository architecture? What is the example of it? When to use advantages and disadvantages? You can take a look at the pictures of it here. Yeah, this one is one of the example of the IDE repository architecture. So you have a project repository, and then you have editors, code, Java editors, Python editors. Yeah, it's external. So that kind of diagram is called the repository architecture. And then you have a CS architecture. So you can see that I believe you taking the course that related with the computer networks. You know what is a client and server. And then again, you can describe the client and server architecture based on the patterns. Again, you have these items. So what is a description of the CS? What is example? When to use, advantages, disadvantages, and then you can see the idea how it goes. Okay. And then this one is a film library, client server architecture. You have internet in the middle. You have certain things on the store on the server side, right? And then you're gonna have a client, or on the other side they have a interface between them. Okay. And then the pipe and filter architecture. So you can see the definition. What is the pipe and the filter architectures? Okay, consider this one as a pattern, and then you can see that what is a pipe and filter patterns. One of the example will be the processing invoices, and then again, what is the description of the pipe and filter patterns, what is example, what is how, when to use, advantages and disadvantages. And then this one is a payment system, which is a typical pipe and filter architecture. So you can see that certain diagrams, how it goes. Okay. So, and then the other one is system design. Oh, sorry, application system. So it's designed to meet organization needed or company need. And then as a business's common application system should also tend to be the common architecture reflects on the order of application requirement. And then the general application architecture is type of software that configure and then adapt the system to meet the requirement. So when they're gonna use for the application architectures, you can see the list in here. Right, as a starting point, as a checklist, as a way of the co-work with the development team, assessing the component to fully use, and then the vocabulary as a vocabulary or common medium between the group. They have a four of application type: data processing application, transaction processing application, event processing application, and language process applications. Again, this kind of thing is not. I'm keep telling you that, especially for the software engineering or computer-related courses, there are a lot of new things happening. And then mostly, particularly, they are connecting with the management. They don't have explicit or the absolute answer. Okay, even in the textbook, they give you the one of a recommendation from the other research, not the absolute answer. So if you purely understand the concept, then when you become a leader or head of a development team, you may develop those kind of things by yourself to make your development team to have a common sense of particularly the software system of your company or your organization. So I'm keep telling you that you need to consider this one as one of a recommendation, and then if you wanna do the right choice, which means that you need to you need to take a look at the various sources and then the benchmarking the various company or various system and so forth. So keep in mind for that, okay? I'm not consider this one as like one-way communication or one-way teaching and learning things, okay? So you need to keep thinking by yourself how you're gonna, if you become a manager or you become not manager but you become a head or leader of those types of company, then how you're gonna handle that. You need to keep in mind those kind of things in this course. Okay, there are examples of the application. Of course, it's quite it is quite common, right? I mean, for your case, you are already use smartphone, and then you can easily download software, and then you can see that what kind of software you have. Yeah, I believe you are not only playing the game, right? You should, you're gonna have like a software like application like a banking or your planners, or yeah, of course game is included, but not more than that, like Google Maps or the emails, Gmails, other softwares. So do you consider that one as application? So yeah, again, it just is conventional categorization or conventional distinction about the system. So it's not like bonded one. Okay, you need to keep in mind. And then there is a transaction system. So that for user perspective, a transaction is the current sequence of operation satisfy the goal, And then yeah, so like for example, like finding the time of flight from the London to Paris. That is, users make the asynchronous request for the services. Yeah, you need to, if you're dealing with real time or synchronous request, then the system becomes more complicated. So this one is your example of the transaction process, yeah, I/O processing and the application logic, transaction manager, database. Or for example, like ATM system, you can see that the ATM, and then you communicate with the database, and then going back to the ATM machine again. So that will be the typical software architecture. So, and then you can see that it's not only rectangular; they have some rounded rectangular also. So it's up to you how to use them. There is no concrete or absolute way to describing the or drawing the your architectures. Okay. And then information system architecture. So again, you're gonna have several layers, interfaces, communication, information retrieval, the system database. Okay, so layered information system architecture, you can have this one. And then again, it's not the absolute diagram, all right? So you need to consider, or you may need to redraw it, or make it more easy, or make it more complicated. It's up to you how to design or how to draw the your system system. And then the ment care, again, this ment care is one of a case we've been get through in the previous chapter, which actually kind of hidden on the presentation because I didn't bring up the ment care by ment care case up front. So yeah, I kind of recommend you need to take a look at the textbook, okay? And then based on the layered architecture we provided on the previous slide, then you can see that the mapping, how the Medicare system is working like. So you can see in here of the diagram. And you can have a web-based information system, so e-commerce system or internet-based resource management system. Or the similar those kind of things, web-based information system. Okay, and then it's not only for the information, right? You're gonna have a transaction also on the system. Now these days kind of merging or the integrate together. System implementation. So you can take a look at server implementation. You can take a look at the web server. What is a web server about? And then applications server. What is about the application? What kind of responsible you need to dealing with? Database servers. What is a database server? So the servers is not only, and then you can see that the sum of a component of the servers. And then language process system. Okay, so you can take a look at again, now these days when you look at the variety of the application or the system, the language processing is not that how can I say, it's not that popular or it's not that widely used one, but still is one of a typical application. So you need to take a look at what is a language processing. Okay, so there's architecture of the language processing system. And take a look at in here. So source of language introductions, and then you have a data, translators, and then the interpreters, abstract and instruction interpreter, and then bring the result to like a translated data and so forth. All right, and then the compiler. So you can take a look at. They have some of a analyzer, right? Syntax analyzer, lecture analyzer, and the semantic analyzer. They have several couple of analyzer. It's part of the system of the compiler. Okay, so yeah, you can take that. This one shows a repository architecture of language processing system. All right. So yeah, you can see this one, and then the 5 filters compiler architecture. All right. So slightly different than the previous one. So basically, software architecture is a description of how software is organized, and then the architecture design of this include this design decision is include decision on the type of application, distribution of system, architecture styles. You need to include it, and then the architecture made documented several different perspective. Okay, so and then the view not only the perspective, also different view, including conceptual view, logical view, processing view, and the development view. And then architecture patterns basically describe the architectures, when to use, how to use, examples, and so forth. Okay, and then yeah, there are example for the transaction process systems and then language processing system and so forth.